And we're live. So we're not on our usual channel today because Alex is taxi driving and stuck at the airport. He may be late. He may not be here at all. We'll find out. So until he gets here, we have opportunity to get decisions made without his input. So
Let's abuse
go,
that.
Louis, because you had the main
Okay.
item on the agenda. Well, in fact, you have both items on the agenda. One of which is actually written down, and one isn't.
Yeah, but the other one is small, so let's start with that one so that if people catch up, come late, they have a better chance of
Chance of
hearing
seeing.
the longer and more interesting discussion.
Okay.
So a cache doesn't know its alias. It's a design decision, but it creates some complexities for having meaningful logging inside the cache.
Right.
Because suddenly you have all caches logging the same statements and you have no idea which cache it happened. Ehcache made a pull request that was using MDC, so Map Diagnostic Context, which is available in both Log4j and Logback as logging implementation. And I
At the
talked to him,
encouragement of Ludovic and I.
and I also mentioned it at one point, but then I thought a bit about it, and today I had a discussion with him, and we decided to go a different route. The main reason is currently it was the cache manager setting the MDC property, which means the MDC, the Ehcache alias was only known when you were logging from the cache for an operation that was triggered by the cache manager. So that ruled out all the standalone caches, and it ruled out all individual cache operation on which we may want to have meaningful logging, maybe not even now, but just in the future. So that's one big reason. The second big reason, in order to see that information, you need to add it to your logging pattern. But Ehcache is a library. It's not an application, meaning it forces us to document that our users need to change their log patterns to see it, while they know explicitly that that value will be non-existent for 99.9% of their log statements. And so I believe that these two arguments were compelling enough to say, okay, let's rule out MDC. It's not a good idea. That's not what it should be used for. Not a good design. So what I proposed then was to use instead the logger name and have the logger name be the fully qualified class name, as we usually do, but then follow it by the cache alias, because then it respects the whole concept of logger hierarchy. And it's something that all patterns, I mean, all commonly used patterns outside end up printing the class name. Frequently, what you will see contracted are the package names, but not the end.
Right.
Yeah, and so in that context, I think it makes more sense. However, in order to do that, it means that you have to do logger injection, which in the context of the cache manager is pretty easy because by default, the cache has an alias associated to it. It's known by the cache manager, not by the cache, but it has an alias. It becomes a bit more tricky in the standalone case, but then what I said is just add a name to the standalone cache builder.
Okay.
So it's not in the standalone cache itself, but it's the standalone cache builder, and that replaces the role of the cache manager for injecting the logger into a standalone cache.
Could we do the sort of the DI here using the service stuff rather than having to do it using constructors?
I know Ehcache already made a pull request by going through the constructor. I thought a bit about the service stuff, but for the moment, a cache doesn't have access to the service locator, to the service provider.
Because it's given a fully instantiated store.
Because it's given everything it needs by either the cache manager or the standalone cache builder.
Right. Okay.
Normally, today, as of today, a cache doesn't know about services. The cache just knows about what it needs.
Right. How do? Yeah. I mean, it sounds reasonable what we're doing. Feels like it must be a problem other people have seen. But I guess most people solve it by having the thing know.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
does this like I mean, for example, does a servlet? I guess a servlet knows its path, right? Or does it not? If I
No, it
deploy
doesn't.
multiple copies of the same servlet bound to
No,
different
but
paths on the container, what does the logging do?
nothing special. If you log using the class name, you've
You're
got the same issue.
confused. Right.
Yeah, you need to do something about it if you want.
But but in the case of a servlet container, you could probably use MDC because everything comes through the container.
Yes, and you've got
It's kind of
the
classically
proper.
what MDC is for, I guess.
Yeah, yes, because you've got the per thread
Yep.
isolation and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yep. Okay. Cool. We'll do this. See what happens.
Yep. So that's it, and it's out
Review.
for review. Yes. I probably will ask Abhilash to update the title of the pull request because the title still says MDC,
MDC.
but
Yeah.
it's no longer MDC.
It sounds reasonable.
So yep, that's it. So you see, the two arguments against MDC were pretty valid and hard to.
Sure, I can't refute that, even though MDC is cool and I'd like to have used it.
I think the second argument is a bit moot, but the first one is strong enough to justify the change by itself. So let's not digress.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's not then. So the second bit, and I'm probably gonna share. That's gonna be the easiest. Wait, let me not do it like that. Let me do it like that, if it works. And so there. And Chris, if you could make me
You can do that yourself, I believe.
Not in a.
Oh boy, now I have to remember how you have to figure out how the hell you do this. Present to everyone. There we go.
Thank you.
I'm probably
So-
I don't know if that counts as cursing what I just said, but it's too late.
The next point. Let me know if it's not big enough. The next point is about the
If you're
107 configuration integration.
How much text are you going to write? If you're not going to fill the screen, I'd make it a bit bigger because if watching that on a YouTube video would be a bit annoying.
Like that?
Another notch. Looks good.
So, the next point that I want to cover is the whole discussion around GSR 107 configuration and the XML support we have. So, just to set the context, if you remember, what 107 offers out of the box is a mutable configuration object. That mutable configuration object is the only way from the standard that you can specify configuration information without going provider specific.
Or writing your own implementation of the configuration interface.
Or writing your own implementation, correct?
Right.
And it covers the following fields: key and value types, store by value is statistics enabled, management enabled. Let me. So there. Key value type, the listener configuration, the cache loader factory, cache writer factory, the expiry policy, his read through, his write through, which are linked to the loader and writer factories, statistics enabled, store by value, management enabled. And it sets a number of defaults, which you have no way to know whether they were specifically picked by the user or really are the defaults you get when you instantiate the class. So in this context, and I'm gonna start the discussion by saying what I think we should provide from an implementer specific. What I think we should have is that. So it's a, forget about the names for the moment, it's just about the concept. Each sample configuration which allows me to create
Did it get small again, or is it me?
sorry? Which allows me to create a GSR 107 configuration object. And the configuration object compared to the complete configuration we just discussed only talks about the cache key, the key type, the value type, and the store by value.
Right.
So here what I'm saying is I want a cache that's going to be from long to strings, and it's going to be store by value. And so if I do caching provider, let me do it like that. Okay, so that's my cache manager. So I create such a configuration, and then what I do is cache manager, create cache, some cache, configuration. Okay?
Yep.
And what I get when I do that using Ehcache is I get a cache coming from the XML with all the attributes that are defined in the XML. The type of the key, the type of the value need to match or be
Undefined.
No, not undefined. Either undefined or be a subtype of the type defined in the template. That's the current implementation rules we have around that.
Okay.
And this value, we could discuss making that optional. So that our EH107 simple configuration could even let the store by value come out of the template. For the moment, the way I've wrote it, it doesn't work.
Why wouldn't we allow everything out of the template? Why are you special casing those things? Well, I guess the key stuff makes sense because otherwise you've got nothing to infer the generics from.
Yes, exactly.
But
okay.
Also,
and so that would be the way of working in creating multiple cache that share common configuration out of an XML file. And that would be the way of having the least amount of code versus the maximum in the XML configuration.
Okay.
Okay. Then I think we should have something. Then I think we should have something else, which is, let me do one thing. Whatever. We assume it's initialized in all the tests. Then I think we should do something else, which is EH107. That exists already. Let me then abuse the names we have already.
Okay.
Probably gonna need to create it. Okay, and that one, I think we would not make the same mistake. So that one would be again, sorry. God. And that one would be actually complete configuration.
Right. But it can but allows us to discern
But it would
value
allow
from a
us
default versus
to
a
discern exactly
right.
was the expiry set,
Right.
was
Okay.
the management enabled set, was the statistics enabled
Right.
set.
So this makes sense. This is right in terms of what. Okay, so here's the thing I'm thinking in my head, right? What's going on?
Go ahead. I'm
So
getting rid of the
what
errors.
you're doing makes sense and is what JS 107 probably should have done itself, or it shouldn't have written a concrete class in the API for the hell of it. There's two things that stick in my craw about this. One, why do we need both of these? If I create an EH107, in your example, I know the class names aren't real, but whatever. If I create an EH107 mutable configuration, but don't actually set anything after I construct it, won't it behave exactly like EH107 symbol configuration?
Yes.
So do we need both, or can we just get rid of one?
Indeed. Open to discussion.
Okay. So the other thing, and it's a slightly orthogonal, but you mentioned it, so I'm going to bring it up again. I'm not going to say it straight away because I want to walk you down a path first. If the template mentions persistence information, like say a location on disk to find things, could it recover data from there? Could you create a persistent or recover a persistent cache using information stored in a template? I.e., in the first example, if the template that was mapped to some cache said, go find the data and the disk information here, could it recover from there?
If you think about it, the way we do, honestly, I don't know. So that's a good question, but I think it's a question for another topic.
Okay.
But honestly, when you think about it, the way we've worked is the alias of the cache was part of the data file. So even if you point the persistent service to a top location, the exact files that it will try to recover will depend on the alias.
Yeah.
And
okay.
From the moment you load them in a cache manager, you can't have two caches with the same alias, so we're
That's
kind
cool.
of protected.
Right, that's fine. No.
Yeah, and the question doesn't apply for standalone.
No, I didn't guide you down the path carefully enough. Suppose the calling create cache there could recover data. I don't think you can allow the types defined in the template to be super types to the types defined in your EH107 symbol configuration. Because if there's persisted data already, it might not match. I think it has to be a perfect match if you're going to allow that. Otherwise, it could have been a number. Suppose it was number and string, the persistent data might contain integer string mappings as well as long string mappings. But here you've allowed them to create that using a long string mapping and expose it, and you'll get class cast exceptions when you try and access things.
Yes, that's correct. So that's actually a good argument.
For bolting down the types there, I think.
Yes.
I mean, either bolting down the types, or we have to be careful about the persistent caches and how we load them and stuff.
Yeah, that's correct. But yeah, that's a good.
But maybe it's simpler just to bolt the types down, because otherwise you're going to end up with weird rules that are different for different types. Or
I would also be tempted to say that non-cache manager managed caches should not be allowed to be persistent.
Non-cache manager managed.
No, but that's always the case.
Anonymous caches, standalone caches.
They can be. You just have to lifecycle all of the persistent stuff yourself.
And it won't be through XML anyway.
Yeah, it's all going to be. I mean, from as far as I'm concerned, because when we talked about this before, so we know that so the way you create standalone caches right now with the standalone cache builder, and the hope was that if you made it so that Cache Manager also used standalone cache builder, then when you're running a standalone cache, all you're doing is everything that the Cache Manager does. So, as far as I'm concerned, you're allowed to do everything there. You do whatever you like, but if you screw up, it's your own problem. You're on your own. The Cache Manager is there to help you if you choose to run without one. For heap caches, it's simple and you probably won't be able to screw up. But if you chose to try and manage disk persistent or clustered or whatever caches, then fine. But don't come crying to me when you screw up and do something dumb.
Yeah, then we have to be super careful, so at least the users cannot shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
At least not
Yeah.
obviously.
At least without being either they have to do something very strange that should automatically make them go, huh? Or walk past a million signs that say, you're going the wrong way, you're doing foolish things, this is going to be bad. And then when it becomes bad, they can't say they weren't warned.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of by the by. But I still think that you're probably going to have to buy this first time. But anyway. Meanwhile, Louis has been doing lots of stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to, but whatever. So if you were to do something like that and forget about what the expiry policy is, but if you do that, then what happens is obviously you're actually overriding what's in the template.
Right.
But if you don't set it, since there is no default, it will know that you did not mean to override it.
Yeah. And I mean, and how we do this is up to us. I'm very pro having so the JDK has something very similar to this for handling command line options, where it's capable of telling whether something has come from default, whether it's come from ergonomics, whether it's been explicitly specified, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, every config value has a provenance, and that's really what we're talking about here. And that'll be useful in other ways too, particularly when we're printing things and stuff.
Yes. Yes.
It's something I'd like to fold into other parts of Terracotta.
And it potentially means also that this could have defaults that are applied if the template does not provide the information.
Yes.
It's just that if you don't set it explicitly, but the template sets it, then you're going to get what the template says.
Well, it's more to me that the Ehcache 107 mutable configuration is a set of values, and the defaults are actually not encoded. To me, there's a couple of things wrong, but one of the things I think that 107 did wrong is that the defaults are encoded inside that mutable configuration instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're not really defaults of the mutable configuration. They're really you really want the defaults defined somewhere where it's more sort of staticky and
and where you get to them if the mutable configuration does not give them, for example.
Because it's weird that the spec refers to the fact that the default value for this is X, but actually it's not. Because if you write your own implementation of that interface, it's kind of ignored. The whole class makes me feel a bit uneasy. But anyway, it's not Bash the spec day. It's not. It's not easy writing them. I can't complain because I was involved.
So I'm writing down the question about the simple configuration, because if the mutable configuration from Ehcache is properly set up, indeed, we probably don't need the simple one.
Yeah.
But I wanted to introduce the topic in stage.
That's cool.
So now the last step is
right.
Is the mutable configuration integration.
Right. So you've done the right thing with 107. You've done the right thing now, but the question is, what happens when somebody does do
exactly
the wrong thing? What are we going to do?
So when they do that, first of all, never do that. Always do that. Otherwise, you have a problem, and you won't be able to load the template because
Right.
it will by default look at them as object, even though they're defined on
That's already filed as
on
a
the
bug
generic.
against
But
the
that's
spec,
yeah,
so
exactly.
we're lucky
So,
that might get fixed.
so if you do that, what you end up having is that you can say that
Excuse me.
is crap. I don't know which how to get to it. How to get to expiry policies instances. You remember how to get
Don't you have something that subclasses like eternal expiry policy dot
I'm not sure. Are they
in-
they
factory off?
we can't see his
Oh
pop-ups.
god, that's weird.
Hard for us.
Okay, whatever.
Some weird stuff like that.
No, but it's just
Anyway.
that I can see it like that.
Point being that the default values from the mutable config override.
Yes. And so here, what it would mean is that if you do cache manager dot create cache you get a cache with external expiry, even if it's defined.
Right, and there's no way of working around that.
Even
Right.
if defined differently in the template. Okay?
Yep.
No, there is no way of working around it because
So
if it's different than eternal, then we can, of course, know that the user set it. But if it's eternal, we have no idea if it's set by the user or if it's the initial eternal.
So you have three choices, right? You can either do nothing and just document that this is the way it behaves.
Yes.
You can log when when a property of the mutable config is equal to its default and it's overriding a template, and just log that and tell the user we're taking what might be the default value from the mutable config and overriding your template. This may not be what you wish.
That's true.
Happen.
I would
Or
log that as a warning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can just completely refuse to work with mutable configs and templates. Just say if you try
Yes.
to configure using a
No.
template, you can use mutable configs without templates, but if there's a template and a mutable config, it will just fail and say, sorry, this doesn't work. Go
Yeah.
do this instead.
Which I think is not what we want to do. I understand why you're proposing it, but I think that's not what we want to do because
Why not?
the use case here is somebody adds mutable configuration.
Can you refuse to work if the template defines some of the properties that are part of the Core 107 set? Because that will never do what you intend. It doesn't make sense. Those template values are not working.
Wait, they're not working.
For the 107 caches, I know they could be.
No, for the 107 caches that are created by receiving, because for the moment we're looking at mutable configuration, but honestly, mutable configuration is the entry point. But think of it as Empire configuration.
Yep.
Which is a complete configuration instance. We have the exact same problem. We're not going to be able to do anything specific. And so what I believe we want to do is say, yes, we allow you to pass us a complete configuration, but here is how it's going to behave.
Well, you can't say that for a complete configuration, because that's an interface. But if it's an instance of mutable configuration...
No, if it's an instance of a complete config... If it's an instance of a complete configuration which is not an EH107 mutable configuration,
right,
we will apply what we get from the mutable from the complete configuration, since we have no idea how it was constructed and if it's defaults and stuff like that.
Why? I don't. So maybe I'm being dumb.
So wait, I'm a yeah, probably doesn't apply indeed, but I'm a Gemfire user and I've configured a number of caches, and I decide to try out what happens if I switch the implementation with Ehcache. And indeed, it's true. Then you can't reuse that if you've got the specific configuration file types from whatever. But let's say, I'm a user of Ehcache of 107, and I've created my complete configuration instance.
Right.
And I switch from one provider to the other.
Right.
We should be able to let them load their cache as templates. Because if that's what they did in code, one of the objectives Alex mentioned is we want to be as frictionless as possible in switching to us.
But isn't the idea then that they would so they start out being a generic 107 or they start out being a Gemfire user, and they're using 107 internally.
Yes.
And they've defined all their Gemfire configs, and their Gemfire config gets loaded by default or however, right?
Yeah.
And so we say to them, and they're over, and maybe they've got, okay, so then we say to them, all you have to do is write your template.
Yes. And for the rest, it's going to use what you configured in code. So most likely,
right, but as long
if you're doing it like that, you will not need to specify these information in your templates.
But you couldn't.
Why? Yes, you could. You could specify the expiry also in the template and have an equivalent Ehcache expiry that maps to the one.
But we know that that's not going to work.
No, it is going to work.
No, it's not going to work. It's going to get overridden by us because their config's going to.
Yes, but let's say they're on a migration path. They could put everything in the XML file. It's just that as long as they don't change the code, it gets ignored and overwritten. Yes.
I'm confused. I don't see the value then. If the stuff in the XML isn't getting applied, what's the point of it being there? They're writing that template file specifically to work with us. Why wouldn't we just tell them, if you're going to be using configurations, don't define these things in templates?
Because it's the same template file they use elsewhere, where they've got another way of loading their caches, a pure Ehcache one, for example.
Okay.
Whatever.
So I guess the answer then is it has to be just really aggressive logging, like Louis said.
Yes, I think that idea makes a lot of sense. But I want to go over the different properties.
Are there any ones that we can? Why?
That's no, because I think we need to do a bit. We need to specify a bit more.
Okay.
So expiry policy factory, listeners factory. Configuration that gets cache entry listener configuration. That's also gonna override.
Right. You can just copy them out of the file, can't you?
That's also gonna override. That's also gonna override. And so on for the rest. One bit that I want to specify a bit more, is that.
Because they're not orthogonal.
Not completely. If that one, currently what we do is we ignore that one. Meaning if this is false, whatever. I'm sorry, but I want to be explicit, so I'm going to write it like that, even though IntelliJ doesn't like it. If this is false, there is an issue in one of the TCK tests that I think has been fixed.
Yep.
In the new release, where it was not correctly mapped, etc.
Yep.
Today, and I probably should have double checked that, but I'm pretty sure, given what I've done, today, if you've got is read through false, but template contains a loader writer,
Right.
Ehcache will use it.
Okay.
And I think we should change that. I believe if that's not set, I mean, if this is false, we need to ignore from the template.
Why?
Because again,
Huh?
this is in the context of a complete configuration instance, which is not the one we know.
Right.
Okay, where we can't check if the false here is explicit
Or it's
just
the
a
default.
result of the default that's set because this is a primitive boolean, and so it must have a value, etc., etc. Now, if you have this and this, I think we should behave like that.
Right. Yes. If someone specified read through, well, the whole problem here is that read through is redundant because it can just be in a same in a legal configuration, right? I think if read through should be mapped to cache loader factory non-null.
Yeah, I think it's
Agreed.
I think some of the tests do weird stuff, but
I
or
thought that
maybe
was the thing that was fixed.
yeah, probably might be.
So what you're saying here is if the configuration is set read through to true, you've got to assume that if the cache loader factory is null, it's because it's the default, and therefore we should pull it from the template.
From the template, but if we don't find one in the template, then we indicate that as an error. If it matches
throw an
what the
exception.
spec, we
What
throw
if-
an illegal state exception.
Okay.
And I would apply the exact same logic to the writer. And of course, if you've got both the read-through and a cache loader factory, then that obviously overrides what's in the template, period.
Obviously, it's already clear. Okay. This is going to have to be really carefully documented.
I think when you think
What
about
if?
it... Sorry?
What?
What if configuration is read through is false and a cache loader was specified in the code?
In what code? In the template?
No, not in the XML, in the Java code.
So in the cache loader factory, you've got something, but read through is false?
Yes.
We just need to look at the spec,
Error.
but I think we ignore, and that's good.
I
They
think
should
that
have
deserves at
set
least a
read
warning.
through on the config if they've set a loader on the config.
I'm not even sure
I think.
mutable configuration does anything like that.
Plenty of ways to create a completely wrong configuration.
Yeah. It's fun, isn't
Yeah,
it?
otherwise it's not fun. So when you set the cache loader factory, it does not even toggle the flag.
No. Go look at the Java doc in the interface.
To what? On the
On the get.
yeah,
thing.
I don't know why I don't have it. Doesn't download the sources, so I don't have the Java.
Can't find it.
So that would be the proposition. And I think, Chris, you say yes, it has to be carefully documented. I agree with you, but I think, except for that special details about the loader and the writers, I think it's pretty easy to explain.
think we should also, with the load of writer stuff, it should log when it's doing those things.
Yes, yes. So what we document is when you pass us a complete configuration that we don't know, the specific type, we're gonna take everything it says as an override of whatever comes from the template.
Right.
You will be warned if it ends up overriding something that's in the template. You'll get a log statement. The extra careful addition is the logic between read-through and read-write-through and loader-writer factories. And we document that. If you want to use a complete configuration that will respect your template when you don't change the defaults of the complete configuration, then use the EH107 mutable configuration, and that one is smart enough, and we know about it, so that we're not just gonna use the getters and know the state. We're gonna look at, is it an explicit state, and if it's not an explicit state, then we're gonna use what's in the template if the template provides the information.
Okay.
And I believe like that, it makes it simple enough. So I've stopped sharing.
I'm trying to find the spec of my local machine.
Oh god, I've stopped sharing, but you still need to stop.
Oh, I still need to stop you being
stop
present.
pretend. No, it's okay. I can do that. I just did, I believe. Oh,
I did it too. So.
Well, that's weird. So I tried doing it and it didn't work.
Oh well. Let's stop now because I'm seeing myself. I believe there's vague language in the interface that talks about this for cache loader. Get cache loader factory. It says on the method in complete configuration gets the Javax cache configuration factory for the Javax cache integration cache loader, if any. A cache loader should be configured for read-through, in quotes, caches to load values when a cache miss occurs using either. So, yeah, I don't know what they're obviously redundant. It's bizarre that they both exist, but I don't understand. Apparently, I don't understand caching.
Cache configuration.
Configuration, yes, it's complicated business.
Concrete classes in an API. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's always a bad idea because you always screw up somehow.
So, yeah.
Which is why obviously we scatter them all over the place.
Yes. So, given that, do you think it's a valid plan and it makes sense to roll it out like that?
It's the best of a bad bunch of choices. I don't like it, but I don't see that you could do much better, to be honest.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm not trying to damn the work that Appalachia's done or anything. It's just it sucks.
No, I know. Nothing's complicated in the code there. The only complication comes from the fact that we need to, on one side, be ready to be spec compliant, and on the other side, try to be nice to our users so that they can make sense of how we behave and why we behave like that.
Yeah.
Remember, potentially, that's just for cache creation. If you are using a caching provider that allows you to create the caches without ever calling cache manager create in 107,
retrieving them, you've defined
just
XML, yes,
cache manager get.
Yep. And given how weak
given how weak the Java-based configuration is, it's probably what you'll use most of the time. So again,
we've probably spent an hour discussing something that may never
be used or impact a very small percentage of user, but I think it's what makes also the provider complete and well behaved in the environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I say it sucks, but world sucks.
And so I agree. So we need to find a name for that configuration, a complete configuration instance. But I agree, we probably don't need the simple one, since we have a smart stuff that knows about defaults. Now,
I'm tempted to call it.
there is still a tricky bit, though.
There is?
Yes. And the tricky bit is when you call cache.get configuration.
You have to return a complete configuration.
No, you don't have to. The spec does not force you in any way to
Oh,
do
it
that.
returns.
So for the moment, what I did is it returns only a configuration.
Right.
Because if I start having to return a complete configuration, I have a problem in the sense that I need to find a way. So for the moment, the way we've done the implementation is everything gets down to an Ehcache type that's used by Ehcache.
Right.
Meaning that if you give me a 107 expiry policy, I'm going to transform it into an Ehcache expiry, and the cache is going to use that.
Right.
So that the frontier between 107 and Ehcache is really on the 107 side.
Yep.
Everything you inject me, I'm wrapping into Ehcache concepts, and it's used as an Ehcache concept internally.
Yep.
The day we want to expose a complete configuration, we have to walk the opposite direction.
Weird lines, because then yes, we have to be able to expose.
Which is not an issue for management enabled, statistics enabled, store by value,
They're all primitives.
keys, etc., because it's all primitives or class. But as soon as we start thinking about the factory for cache loader, the factory for cache writer, the factory itself is not an issue, but the cache loader, the cache writer, that's already a bit more fun. Because you suddenly have to wrap the cache loader writer, etc., and the same for the event listeners.
Yeah. I would be tempted to.
And so honestly, I would be tempted to trick it and say, if you ask for a configuration, what I'm gonna return you is the basic one. If you ask for a complete configuration, I'm gonna tell you, sorry, can't do that. But is that by the spec? I don't know. And if you ask me for an Ehcache 107 runtime configuration, then I can return you that, but don't expect to see a complete configuration instance. Expect to see a configuration instance with extra fields. But like you would be able to get out the loader writer, you would be able to get out, and we need to decide on this. And
Yeah,
the question is that a strategy which is acceptable? I don't believe I don't believe it says anywhere we have to be able to return a complete configuration. Or does it?
Yeah. So the Java doc says provides a standard way to access the configuration of a cache using JCache configuration or additional proprietary configuration. The return value must be immutable. If the provider's implementation does not support the specified class, the illegal argument exception is thrown. An illegal argument exception, but sorry. Param class. The configuration interface or class to return. This includes @link configuration.class and @link javax cache configuration.complete configurations. So it doesn't say. I mean, as far as I was concerned, there's no. If somebody is given the way this stuff is normally, the TCKs for these things should be written per the rulebook. You're supposed to read the Java doc, only the Java doc, not the spec document. Read the Java doc, extract the testable assertions, and write tests to test them. To my mind, there is no testable assertion statement in here that says if you pass in a complete configuration, it mustn't throw a legal argument exception.
Yeah,
so I think we're fine. But I'm trying. How do I say this?
Honestly, that's the point where I would stop and see if somebody requests it.
Yes. Well, I don't care about that. If somebody requests it, if somebody wants more detailed configuration access at runtime, tell them to request. I mean, what happens if you pass in one of our configuration types there?
Oh, again, for the moment, I would need to double check the code, but for the moment, it's pretty limited.
Right. So what I would do is, if you pass in configuration.class, return configuration.class, our skin of a configuration class. If somebody passes in
complete configuration,
if somebody passes in complete configuration, totally like them. And if somebody passes in Ehcache's configuration type, interface type,
then we say, okay, fine, there it is.
Sure, here it is. But at that point, you're on Ehcache land. The thing I worried about is that I know that the TCK was not written in what is considered the formal style. Well,
sure,
it was written. You can argue about whether it was written in formal style. It certainly wasn't derived in a formal style. I don't think.
Honestly, the day they add such a test, and it becomes
we'll make the argument about it.
We fixed it.
But you can't do that because the TCK defines what is and is not a passing spec.
No. I understand. So
I guess.
So the day they do 1.1 or whatever,
we jump up and down if we see it coming. Hopefully, we get to run before it gets frozen.
Yeah, sure. But but if it needs to happen and we're the only one saying no and etc., it can happen.
Right, it's been discussed before, and basically they've been ruled out of type. My understanding is you can't tighten these things because if somebody passes in, it's the same reason you can't add features. You can't make it so that somebody that previously passed
so it's only when it's version 2, which is another GSR completely.
Yeah. But Hal, let's just see what happens.
It's Jcache 2.0 if that happens one day.
For now, we're not doing any of this in bad faith.
No.
We're doing what we think is the right thing. We're not being nefarious here. We're doing what we believe to be the right thing. We believe it's in the bounds of the spec.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can expose a complete configuration. It's just
that I don't see.
It's going to be very hard to not make it a very thin, facade-y thing that everyone can see around.
Yeah.
It's very much Emerald City, peek behind the curtain-ish stuff.
Yeah.
Right. We got that. We always swell this meeting to fill the hour.
Oh, it's good. But then it means I'm gonna do the
we can move ahead, yeah.
And probably paste the small code templates with comments on the issue, and then that's probably gonna remain Srikanth's work.
Oh, Srikanth, sorry.
We had a discussion on that this morning, so everything I've said just stayed the same.
Yeah. Well, we have a viewer, maybe it should count.
Well,
I didn't actually bring up the Q&A. The viewer could have been asking questions. No, except the feature's disabled and I have no idea how to enable it. I apologize, viewer, if you had a question. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up?
Oh, that's it for me.
Okay. Thanks for the intelligent conversation. And I guess we'll meet again next week, and it will probably be back on Alex's channel.
Yep.
Hopefully with Alex.
And with Alex, yeah.
Probably. Although, it's Thursday? No, it's not. It's the 12th. I thought it was Valentine's Day for a second.
No.
It's the Saturday.
Yes.
Something's happening on the 12th. I can't remember what.
It's a Thursday, and we have an Ehcache public dev meeting.
It's a Thursday, yeah. 3 days before the healthcare.gov deadline.
Shh. We're not supposed to speak about our customers.
What? Oh, what? Okay, we should probably take this off live before we mention other things we're not supposed to talk about. Cool. See you guys next week.
See you.